It is 2:00 and this meeting will come to order. Roll call, all the trustees are here. Treasurer is not here yet. So our first section is the discussion of materials selection policy. And last time we left off in the objective and scope of policy on the first page. The next concern that the attorney wanted us to address was no specific book or material was contemplated during the enactment of this policy. He had said that it was unusual, but let's see if there's that. It was unusual, but not prohibited. So you guys want to take it out or leave it in?
And I'm sorry, what part is that?
It's on, highlighted on the screen. You don't try to follow.
Well, that's certainly not gonna help me up there.
A little bit of a twist. Twisted.
It's right here.
It's the last sentence that starts with no specific book or material was contemplated during the enactment of this policy and the objective and scope of policy on page 1. Trustee Mike?
Can I have my memory refreshed from the attorney? He felt it was unusual in what way? I don't remember. Why?
Well, it's just unusual that library policies around the nation don't make a statement related to what specific book they're contemplating when they're updating a policy. So unusual from that perspective. And also it's a statement that a trustee could just make on the record. It wouldn't necessarily be appropriate or required in a policy. So I didn't object in the sense that I would say, don't do it as a legal opinion, just that it's unusual and it may have limited use for us legally in the future. I mean, you could make that statement as a board and it would have essentially the equal effect on the record of the meeting.
Trustee Hammond?
Since I'm the one that had it in there initially, it was just to make sure that no one interpreted this policy to appear that we were going after a particular book. So if legal counsel doesn't see any value in that, I'm not obsessed with it. I think I was the one that got that in there initially, so I'm happy to strike it if there's no value in it. If it doesn't give us any extra legal protection, then if that's the way it's seen by legal counsel, then I'm fine with it, with being taken out, if there's no value to it.
Trustee Potts?
I guess I'm not sure. Are we continuing a motion that was made and we just resume? Or do we? I think we tabled it, didn't we? So there's still a motion on the table.
Well, we've already gone through it. Now we're going through it
You
again.
did make a motion last meeting when we started it. Go through it. Anyway, I'll make a motion just for the specific to remove that sentence.
Okay, yeah, I don't think we need it. Just where we can go through and do it by consensus in each part. So I have not considered any or contemplated any specific book or material for the enactment of this policy, and to my knowledge, no one else has either.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what you just said.
You know,
You are a little bit quiet today.
I'm exhausted from the driveway.
I mean, but maybe something's wrong with, I feel like there's nothing coming out of the
Yeah.
maker.
Oh, mine didn't come either.
Yeah. That's why I didn't hear the very first thing you said 5 minutes ago.
Something.
Do a testing.
Test.
Yeah, okay, all right.
So I just wasn't close enough.
Okay.
Okay.
So I didn't hear the last sentence.
Okay, I just said that I hadn't contemplated any specific book and the enactment of this policy and but I don't care whether the phrase is in there or not. So we could leave it up to those who feel strongly, I guess, or. Trustee Blank.
I am happy to remove it.
Okay, so how many are for removing it? Okay, so it's like, those who want to remove it, have it, so we will take that out. So I think that the next attorney concern was on page 3, it was the last bullet. All right, so appropriateness of subject and style, was there, let's see, was there more correct library science language, or I think I've seen that word in other library policies, so is the word appropriateness appropriate there?
It's very vague.
Do you have something better? Best?
My concern with this is how how appropriateness now has a definition. And the definition is harmful to minors, but that this sentence doesn't denote that harmful to minors only applies to the non-adult collection, since the library cannot restrict those materials from the adult selection. So appropriateness now related to adult intended users also means harmful to minors, will be subject to a potential claim by an adult that we're restricting their access to material that they otherwise should have access to. So if we're going to define appropriateness that way, we should have it denoted in as it relates to the adult collection and then as it relates to the minor collection.
Okay, so we could add, after, on that same line, for purposes of this criteria, comma, we could add related to the library's non-adult collections, and then go on with the sentence. Treasurer?
My recommended language in the other policy was suitability of subject and style for age of intended library user.
Suitability of,
Subject and style for age of intended library users.
Trustee Young?
Yeah, could we read that bullet point out in full so I make sure I understand? The corrected version.
Okay, well, we have two different changes here to contemplate. So I guess we'll deal with the first one, which was adding the words related to the library's non-adult collections after for purposes of this criteria. So altogether, that sentence would read, for purposes of this criteria related to the library's non-adult collections, appropriateness means a determination of whether such content is, in the opinion of the board or library staff, harmful to minors, as that term is specifically defined in this policy. Trustee Blass?
I think I was going to suggest similar, but after, in the opinion of the board and staff, harmful to minors with regard to material designated for non-adult sections, as none. So it's a, I don't know which one is less clumsy, but it's talking about harmful to minors. The material designated for non-adult. So I can type as if you want,
It's
but
all of that definition. Let's see that. So, so that says that it is harmful to minors, as that term is specifically defined in this policy. But that term, as it's defined in this policy, isn't Idaho code. Does that put us in a legal bind, a legal jeopardy, a legal problem? Because, the words that are used for defining harmful to minors in this section does not refer at all to Idaho code. It refers to another state's code. So what does that do legally to us? I'm asking a question. I was asking, I would like the attorney's response.
I think that's appropriate consideration, especially in light of the new bill that was put forth yesterday in the legislature, which slightly tweaks the harmful to minors law in Idaho. So would it be a bad idea to have those line up as closely as we can, especially in light of the phrase "in the opinion of the board or library staff"? Because that could be two different opinions. And then we have two different potential applicable statutes. And so I do see some opportunity to clean that up by how we can identify the one decision maker and let that flow down.
Trustee Robinson?
In light of what the attorney just said, can we break that down? Can you maybe say again, what, in your opinion, for this board, in the library, what you mean by that exactly? Because it's gonna be glossed over, and we're just gonna go back to this this page of descriptions that I really, really don't want on our policy. I would much rather have the Idaho code stated, and anybody can look that up and read for themselves, whether it's a staff or a patron. They can look that up, read it, see what the definitions for the code are. So could you please, as the attorney, state again what you mean by what you just said? Because I think it's extremely important to have the Idaho code on this policy. And I don't like the policy in general. I would also like to look at the staff policy that they wrote under the suggestion of the attorney. But I really don't like these definitions on our policy, and I'd like to go with the actual Idaho code.
I'm not sure what the question is, but I'll try and restate my previous statement. What my concern is that we have an opinion of the board and also an opinion of library staff. We don't know who's delineated in library staff. The other parts of the policy do direct the director to delegate those decisions to staff as appropriate. And so I would interpret that to be the library director, and then as she may delegate to staff these opinions related to the appropriate determination, which then is harmful to minors. And the harmful to minors is as we define it earlier in the policy. So I could foresee the board making a selection decision. Why that would happen is interesting, because typically the director and the staff would do that. But if the board did make an opinion related to appropriateness using the harmful to minors language, then we would have one opinion that could potentially differ from staff's opinion, especially if they were reading our policy and the new law, the existing law or new laws amended, and making a determination on those. So you have two separate sort of thought processes moving that could conflict. And so we definitely don't want to have an opportunity to conflict if possible, and build in an appropriate oversight mechanism to the director to make those determinations instead of leaving open a second avenue, creating conflict, because there's not a process in here to resolve that conflict either. So if the board made a decision that conflicts with the director and then the new law passes, then where does the liability flow for the civil liability that's now $250 if the material was harmful to minors? Does that help kind of flesh it out more?
I hope so.
Okay, I don't really have a specific answer because I don't know the specific question, but I'd like to see one decision maker and one set of criteria that aligns as closely as possible with the state statute. That would be my recommendation.
Mr. Bus?
We've been through this half a dozen times already. This is for purchasing of new material. Purchasing. It isn't anything to do with whether we're going to prosecute somebody or turn somebody into the sheriff. This is just simply a criteria of what we're going to purchase. And I do not see why it has to align with the Idaho code. The other policy for removing books and what we're saying still has Idaho code. This is for purchasing, and I would like to leave it the way it is. I can, well, except I can change, I could agree to change, get rid of in the opinion of the board or staff, and just replace it with as determined by the library director. But
Trustee Blake?
So, does it make a difference that this is material selection? I mean, doesn't material selection have to follow Idaho code as well? I mean, I can't believe that there's any place in our library system where we do not have to follow Idaho code. I mean, don't we follow it here? We are not exempt from Idaho code in this simply because we've developed our own definitions, are we?
No, but we can have a little bit more of an aggressive policy related to selections than we do on removal. The line's not clear where that's going to fall in a federal court litigation one day. But however harmful to minors is defined in state statute, that material should not be in the non-adult collection anyway. And what I see us kind of going back and forth over is what's going to be in the different age groups of the non-adult selection, not whether or not we're going to have material harmful minors. And so I do think we're kind of using the same terms, but they don't have the same meanings. So we can make selection decisions and the director can conform that to the local community standards, however she determines those community standards are, and then make her selection decision based upon that, so long as they're not harmful to minors for the minors collection, right? So I think that was your question. If it's not, I apologize. Trustee Blank.
So would it resolve something for that last line on that bullet point to say harmful to minors as that term is specifically defined in this policy and Idaho state code?
I think our definitions here are tighter than the Idaho code. A lot of it's very similar. I don't see that we're letting something through that I certainly hope we're not letting something through that Idaho code would outlaw. We're tighter. So I don't think that's necessary. Can we go back and you tell me what your wording was? I'll put it in green up here on the board. I didn't get that one. That was the other option.
Okay, for purposes of this criteria, comma, related to the library's non-adult collections. Yeah, another comment would be good there. Thanks.
Is that right?
Yeah. Be collections or collection, because there's different age groups. Now. Director's nodding.
As a reminder, we now have children's, teens, and young adult as non-adult collections.
What are the age groups of those again? I need to make that clear.
0 to 12, 13 to 15, and 16 and 17.
Trustee Blake?
Are we going to consider the director's wording? Because that was asked by, I think, the chair to what that was. So are we going to consider that as well?
Well, we haven't voted on the other one, but we'll get to that. Voted, but is there consensus on adding related to the library's non-adult collections?
Yeah, good. Yeah.
I am not in favor of that, so you do not have consensus.
I'm not in favor of the entire policy, so I'm having a really hard time for the last several months even discussing it. Because it's just evolved into this 2 to 3 policies now. There's so many inconsistencies in there. For instance, if we change the language to it's the director's discretion on these, on the meaning of these words or what books can be picked, but also later today, for instance, we're going to talk about the director evaluation policy. So if we give the director this power to interpret what has been brought out of the ether into this policy, and then the board is like, no, that's not what we thought. That's not our interpretation. So you can easily give the director a bad check mark because she's not interpreting what we've come up with in our own brains, but it isn't clear to her. So this whole thing is so incestual. It needs to be one policy, and I have a hard time discussing it again. It's been months and months and months, and people have been pointing fingers at each other of why it's going on for so long. But the reason is it's just confusing, and it's not clear, and it needs to be one policy, and all these descriptions need to come out of here. We just need to add Idaho code. So I don't even know how to discuss this policy today.
Okay, well, the previous board, there were a lot of things that I disagreed with, but you just discuss them anyway, because that's what you do, to fine tune things. So we did have 3 people with a majority consensus. It wasn't a unanimous consensus, but it is majority. So that change has been accepted into the draft that related to the library's non-adult collections. Okay, so the next thing was changing appropriateness of subject and style for intended library users to the director suggested the suitability of subject and style for intended library users. I'm good with it. Yep. Other comments or Trustee Blake?
Was there more to that you had stated?
The subsequent bullet point was graphic or visual depictions of sexual acts in books and materials geared toward minors under 12 years of age are unsuitable for the children's collection. So I prefer those 2 bullet points over the current draft.
Ceilings?
The bullet point that the director just lined out there was it leaves open for anything that I guess 13 and above, or at least certainly appears that way. So nudity and whatever else it was, and I saw that in the staffed drafts. These are pretty lot of flexibility for what's appropriate from the age of 13 on up. So that's why I don't agree with that particular bullet, and based upon my understanding of it.
So the entire bullet. Just the one sentence that I just read.
The one that was just read by the director.
One done by the director just now.
So would you be okay with just the first part that I read? I can read it again.
Yes.
Suitability of subject and style for intended library users.
I have no issue with that.
That's what's in there. Appropriate. For the library.
If you had it, but it wasn't in the one that was in our table packet.
Well, we took that out. It's, because it was already repeated right there.
No, it's still up there, the last bullet point, it says appropriateness of subject and style for intended library users, and she would like to replace that with suitability of subject and style for intended library users, which is similar, but she feels it's more fine tuned.
Oh, instead of appropriate.
Yes. Oh, yes, I guess the entire rest of the sentence is the same, it would just be, exchanging the word suitability, rather than appropriateness. Trustee Blank?
So, the reason that it has been, the second bullet point, graphic, visual, or written depictions of sexual acts, books and materials geared toward minors under 12 years of age are unsuitable for the children's collection. But the reason that, other trustees didn't care for that is because it didn't include this part on nudity. Because everything else under this is a sexual act, the descriptions in the policy. So we don't want, so we can't have any undiapered babies in a book. I mean, is that the problem?
Trustee Potts?
So this policy, the way it's written, is addressing the one big block under 18 with one definition. Anything that violates that definition cannot be used or bought for that block under 18. There's 3 strata in there, and I don't want to spend our time now trying to define all the 3 strata and the definitions. To me, that's the minor card policy, where we actually talk about those 3 strata. Let's do that later. This is just the one big block under 18, and it's one definition that is kind of worst case. Nothing can go into that block that's there. We can do different strata and all this under 12 and so forth on the minor card policy later.
Trustee Blank?
So I really do, I mean, I hadn't thought of this all the way down. Does nudity mean an undiapered baby in a book? Is that what, is that what we're looking at? So we are looking at, I mean, is that where, I mean, that lacks clarity for me profoundly. I mean, one person's nudity, some people can't stand people in bathing suits.
There's the definition.
Bathing suit would not be nudity. Trustee Robinson?
I would like that, trustee's, question to be answered, possibly by council. Would an undiapered baby qualify as nudity under this policy?
No, because it wouldn't be material harmful to minor, because unless it would if it had a predominant tendency to appeal to a prurient interest in sex to minors, but a diapered or undiapered baby would likely not. And also, unless the average person applying contemporary community standards would find that the material depicts nudity, that would be patently offensive to prevailing standards in the adult community. And then if it also lacked a serious literary, scientific, medical, artistic, or political value. So I would say no.
Trustee Robinson?
Likely no.
Under nudity, it says showing or description of a human male or female public area or pubic area or buttocks with less than a fully opaque covering. And then B goes to C with an or, not an and. So a little baby undiapered from the back would follow under the nudity definition.
B can't go to C with an or, it must go with an and.
I don't see an and.
Well, it's gonna be required.
By who and when?
A federal court, whenever we get sued, if we pass it with an or.
Interesting. There is an or between B and C, and there's no and anywhere to see it.
In the board packet I have, it has an and, but I may be on a wrong page.
Well, there's been so many, it's hard to keep track.
That one under, by your manila envelope is the one I think we're.
I printed my own out. It's 1/11/24. There is no and, there's only an or between B and C.
Okay, yeah, Lynn says or, so should we just change that to an and then?
Yes,
This came up there, came from the board packet.
there needs to be an and there.
Okay, so consensus on changing that, or in between B and C to an and? We have consensus on that? And then we'll go back to the section we were already working on.
Yes, I would vote for that.
I'm talking about here.
And I would be
Oh,
for that.
there's an A, B, and C then.
Oh, okay, I see.
Just to be clear, there's two A, Bs and Cs. There's the A, B, and C, average person 18, and then there's the under nudity. There's an A, B, and C.
Yes, that's what we see. The
So
first B.
I just want to make sure. Are we talking about or
Under nudity,
under nudity?
under nudity as in an undiapered baby from the back would not be able to be in a book for a 17-year-old.
Okay, under nudity, it can be an or, and it would qualify as nudity, but it wouldn't meet the harmful to minors test, likely because it's not predominantly appealing to the prurient interest.
In whose opinion that's picking these books?
This would be an objective, reasonable standard that the court would apply to whatever decision we make.
Okay, you're talking about the court. I'm talking about if the director, whoever's under the director that brings in a book that has an undiapered baby from the back, and the board has a conniption and says the director screwed up. That's what I'm saying. I'm not talking about a court, I'm talking about our policy. Not clear.
Yes, Blake.
Do we want to have a policy that has such lack of clarity that it will require a court to decide it?
Sure.
Mr. Boss?
This is really common sense. At the beginning of the whole section, it is talking about harmful to minors means the very first paragraph on that page. And it says, but in whatever form, nudity, sexual conduct, blah, blah, blah. And then it goes on to say it, and then it's saying what nudity is, but it has to meet this A, B, and C definition at the top of something that's harmful to minors. So no, this is kind of nonsense to dwell on a undiapered baby. And I think we need to, I would like to move on. I've got a couple of other points I'd like to bring.
Everyone's opinion counts and we all discuss things to make a better product, so. Trustee Blake?
It isn't silly to discuss this. I was involved in a request for reconsideration of a children's book that had it was a picture, illustrated book with a very, in the background, the kid was in the yard. In the background was a garage, an old garage, you know, that was used as a workroom. In very tiny, I mean, really tiny, was a depiction of a nudie calendar, and this person wanted it out. It is not unusual to have people have varying feelings about what you could hardly tell what was going on in this. it is not unusual to have something get way detailed.
The way with, it's.
What I'm just,
Hold on, I have the floor now. It's just odd that someone would put a nudie calendar in the background of a children's book. Like, it seems like there's an agenda there, but.
I am sorry, I have to take it, you are making an assumption. You haven't read the book, you haven't looked at it at all. You have no idea. It's a classic kids book.
Okay, well, I said it was odd. I didn't say that I was contemplating removing that book because I didn't know what it is, or anything. It's odd that a library would put that. And, but anyway, Trustee Robinson?
So one of the reasons we were having such an in-depth conversation about this, some trustees don't understand it, is so that we can clarify to the staff if and when a policy actually gets passed, what their responsibility and how they can interpret it. So I will bring up a specific book. I think probably everybody has seen this book. It's called The Big.
Did we not mention the name? Because I don't want someone to come back and accuse us of contemplating certain books.
That is.
I'm not, no. This has to do with what would be let in and what would be let out. We already have this book, I believe. I can do it without mentioning it, but I can describe it if you want. It's been mentioned at our board meetings before.
I'm not sure. I'd rather be.
Could I have counsel answer that? Could I say the name of a book? For clarity for staff of what they would be dealing with?
I'm not sure what you're talking about. And you have the floor. I mean, you want to talk about a book, talk about a book.
Okay, thank you. The Big Bathhouse. It has, everybody I'm pretty sure is aware of that book. Okay. I'm just wondering if that book, and I'm wondering for staff, is that a book that would not be able to be purchased or repurchased for this library under these definitions? And I would like that to be answered by either chair or council or director.
Okay, I have had the opportunity to look at this book. And I read the book and I considered the book. And the book did have quite a few visual depictions of nudity, both minor and adult nudity in I believe it was a Japanese bathhouse. My opinion would be that a court would find that the book does contain nudity, descriptions of female genitals, pubic area, and buttocks with less than a fully opaque covering. Also descriptions of female breasts without fully opaque covering. But no sexual conduct, because there was no physical contact with unclothed genitals. But that it is not predominantly appealing to the prurient interest because it reflected a cultural event that was common in the community, that it would not be patently offensive to the prevailing standards in the adult community with respect to what is suitable for minors, and that it would have some type of serious literary and scientific and political value for minors. But that opinion I'm making now on the fly doesn't anticipate what age group it would be appropriate for. Does that make sense? I'm simply saying a court would say it's not harmful to minors, but they wouldn't necessarily say that it's appropriate for 0 to 12. Maybe it's 13 to 15, but I'm not making that opinion.
Thank you.
Okay, so the or there under B under nudity, should the word be changed to an and, or is it fine as or?
No, that's fine as an order.
We'll get back to the section that we were discussing. Should we change the word? Actually, there's 2 occurrences of the word on page 3, I think. The last bullet point where it says appropriateness, and then the line underneath it also has appropriateness, and it should be changed both of those to suitability. Ms. Plus?
I prefer it the way it is, appropriateness.
Right, so trustee Hanley, you indicated that you're okay with that?
I think I'm indifferent. I'm not sure if I see a big difference between appropriateness and what was our other word again? And
Suitability.
suitability. I see them as one or the other semantic without looking up the definition, so I have no opinion on it particularly.
Right, I think the director thought that it was a more suitable word. Trustee Glass.
I see suitability as more, a utility word. It's suitable. Appropriateness is a judgment. Suitability is more
Exactly.
utility, but I don't think it's the right word.
Trustee Bank.
I think that the trustee put it precisely right. Appropriateness is a judgment. We need it less judgy.
Trustee Ham.
As judgy, I want judgy. I want it to be as strict as it can be within reason. So, I want it to have teeth. And so, again, I have to look up the definitions on appropriateness versus the other word. Anyway, I can go either way, I want to be honest with you.
Director.
I would just ask counsel, there was a lot of case law that used the word appropriate that has been litigated. Is there any consideration for the term in recent case law?
I'm gonna have to research and get back.
There.
Yeah. But I don't have it. Right here.
It's up there.
Okay, so it doesn't sound like we have a consensus to change it at this point. We can come back to that. Trustee Glass.
I'd like to go on to a couple of other things that occurred to me. I'd like to change the name materials selection and acquisition policy, make it clear. This is not just about deciding what's in our current law, but this is about purchasing. And that's the term that the Llano County Court case, the judgment used, material selection and acquisition. So I would like to call it in that, because the court used that term, material selection and acquisition. And I think that would clarify this, we can change under the objective regardless of previously acquired. We can change that with some wording I would like to propose that would make it clear it's about purchases. So that's my proposal.
Trustee Hanley.
I think that actually does clarify things a little bit, because if you just see the word material selection, it's like, what are we picking and choosing inside the library? And then we're purchasing materials. So I actually think that actually adds clarity to the entire content. So I would agree.
Anyone else? Okay, yeah, I don't mind making that change. So I guess that is a consensus change there. Chris Glass?
Yeah, as a follow on to that, the things I'd like to change under objective is, the word selection. The policy pertains only to the selection, and move some words down lower up. The selection for the library's collection So the selection is about the library's collection. And
Wait, okay, so in the objective and scope of policy section?
after the word selection, you put the
What
word,
line?
pardon?
Oh, so the first line?
Yeah, I can type it in here, but it's, the selection for the library's collection and then put the word new. And to put the word new before acquisition. Just to make it clear that it's for new acquisitions. And then I would be willing to strike or new acquisition and purchases, I guess is what I'm saying. And purchases. And then I would be willing to strike this regardless if previously acquired.
There. While he's thinking about it, go ahead, Director.
Yes, I would just say the term acquisition and purchase is extremely similar to librarians. So it's not enough of a difference, or it's not being used in the way that librarians use that term. So if you're talking about a repurchase or purchase of an existing material, it would need to be more clear than acquisition and purchase, because for us, that's the same thing.
Well, I've said new acquisition and purchases. So the new applies to both words. I could put it twice, new acquisition and new purchases of books.
So a new book could be considered something with a copyright of the current year. So is 2024 a new acquisition, or is new a book that we purchased? It was published in 2020, but we never had it, and then we're buying it and it's a new acquisition? Or is it that we had copies of it and they are no longer usable, and so we're repurchasing titles? So again, new does not have a meaning to me in the same way that it does to you.
Chair,
Trustee Robinson.
I'd like to point out again that certain trustees have blamed other trustees for dragging this process on or not passing the policy. And these same trustees that are blaming others come in every single meeting with changes to things that they wrote. And there's just more confusion, more who knows what's going on, petty little changes. And I really don't think that this new recently renamed policy
Actually,
is any different than the existing policy we already have. And so in my opinion, this trustee's opinion, we've worked 6 months on this, several meetings a month, to keep having it changed by the people that wrote it over and over and over. Other people getting blamed for not being passed, the attorney not saying we should pass it. And here we are again, and I just don't even understand why we're moving words around. I just think this whole thing is a mistake, and we should either look at the policy that the staff wrote because the attorney endorsed them to write it to sum everything up, or go back to the original one that actually works and it doesn't have anything different than this one besides ugly, words in it that people are gonna have to look at.
Okay, so I'm sorry, I have a point of order using words like ugly and petty. It's not really quite,
Those are not bad words, sorry.
no, but they don't help us to function.
We're not functioning. That's my point.
Trustee Claus?
So we seem to have forgotten, or we glossed over it, but this was a very issue that our attorney brought up last week, and I guess we skipped it. But this was one of the things we needed to come back to. He recommended we take regardless if previously acquired. I liked it. I'm the one that helped put it in there. I liked it because I didn't want to buy another book that violated this definition, even if it was bought 10 years ago. So I'm trying to find a way to satisfy the attorney who requested those words or suggested those words be removed. And the definition of purchase and acquisition is purchase order, an invoice. The library is spending money on a particular book. That is a purchase, and that's why, or an acquisition, that's why I wanted in the title. It has nothing to do with whether was in the hard files or whether it was previously bought or I want this policy to say we are not going to spend money on a book that violates the policy below. And that's purchase and acquisition.
Trustee Healy?
I listened to the recordings from the last meeting very ad nauseum yesterday and the day before, I think it was. And the attorney did say that 4 to 6 months is an appropriate amount of time, that we're not supposed to rush this policy. It's a struggle, that we're getting really close, both our version and the version that was prepared by staff. So I think it's important that we remember it, if that, assuming that was correct guidance from legal counsel, that it's not that unusual to take this long on a policy, especially because of the impact. And then going back to the current subject regarding if previously purchased, I think that was the word used, regardless if previously acquired. I think the big sticking point listening to the recording last time was concern that we would, that wording in there could be used to deselect material. So if we have some people in the community decide they don't like a certain book and they take it away, or somebody kind of destroys it a little bit, that we can't replace it. So I was thinking if that was the biggest legal risk regarding those words, maybe we could say if the book was lost or it was damaged or destroyed, then maybe we could make an exception for those, but not if it's a popular book, we're going to buy more. I don't know what all the reasons were the director gave, but there were a number of reasons why 20% of the purchases, there was a round number it was given, are repurchased, meaning material we already have. So to me, if it's 20% of the collection, and then we're rebuying material that has to violate our own policy, which is probably going to be rare. And then the book has to be replaced only because it was lost, we'll say lost, stolen, whatever, or it was destroyed, maybe maliciously, maybe not. I'd be open to make an exception for those, just so that we can't be looked at and we can't be accused, so to speak, of trying to give us a way of cleaning books out of this library that are not considered by this board, we'll say, appropriate. So I'm open to putting an extra out in that wording there to do with the previously acquired, regardless of previously acquired.
Sure.
Trustee Robinson?
Yes, the attorney did say that 3 to 6 months is normal. Although I don't recall spending quite that much time in the past. However, I'm positive that the attorney also meant that 3 to 6 months at regular meeting schedule, as in, I think it's 1.4 a month. If you average out the year, not 5 meetings a month. So that's the difference. Just to be clear, we've spent more time on this policy than any policy should ever have spent on it. And that's because people keep adding things to it or changing things. It's not because of some minority trying to stop it up.
Trustee Blake?
I have a question on what was talked about concerning the last trustee that talked about regardless if previously acquired. What was the suggested change?
Is it better?
Not what?
I can't read that, so there's no point in me, so the fact that he's put it up there is great. I need it said to me. I didn't understand what he was suggesting. That's all I'm asking is for clarity.
Great.
It was trustee Henley.
Oh.
What were you suggesting? I didn't understand it.
Shares permission.
Yeah, go ahead, trustee Hanna.
I didn't have the exact wording on it, but a lot of discussion surrounded at the last meeting was concern because of the wording, regardless of previously acquired, that could be abused, we'll say, by the community, we'll say, because I don't think the trustees are going to be the ones that are going to take books out. But if people find a book they consider offensive and they know that we can't purchase the book again, that could be used as a tool to take books out of the library that people don't like or they think are inappropriate. So I was suggesting that maybe and that was part of the discussion last time. I have a partial transcript. I had to go back and look right here. But if previously, regardless if previously acquired, I was thinking unless the book was being replaced because it was damaged or stolen. And I don't know if there's another reason why, but I would say that I'm open. We got to be a little bit flexible, I think, on certain things here, that I can't just be, all or nothing kind of on my way or the highway. So if regardless of previously required means that there's a chance that wording allows us to secretly somehow get rid of books. So I say, regardless of previously acquired, maybe so long as, or I would say, unless the book was stolen or damaged, then it's simply being replaced. And again, I don't remember all the categories of reasons why we reselect. I remember one of them was if the book is lost, if it's damaged, or if it's a popular book. I do remember hearing those. So I'm open to leaving it in there because I like it in there, but I can also say I have some flexibility that I don't want it to be abused. We have a reconsideration policy that addresses things like that.
Trustee Fox?
The way I recall legal counsel saying is that could be interpreted as a withdrawal applied to withdrawal, that now we're going to take it out of the card catalog, or we're going to not make it available. I think to what I recall is it was confusing that it was maybe a link to a weeding method. I don't think it was like that we couldn't buy it, or there would be a way to get rid of books by stealing them. It was confusing. So I wanted to get that out and just talk about separately as purchases. But let me put this in what Trustee Hanley's saying.
Chair.
What was that again?
Someone has the floor.
Trustee Hanley, what was your wording again?
Well, actually, wait, Trustee Robinson was next.
If the director could recall how she described why it would be confusing, because I do recall that conversation about it's already in the collection or the catalog as a purchase, so you wouldn't have to consider if you're going to purchase it again because it was already in there. Do you recall that, how you explain that? And if so, is she okay to tell us?
Okay, actually, Trustee Hanley was next.
I think I was responding to Trustee Plas's question.
I typed up there. Is it?
It's something to the effect of, with the exception of replacing books that were lost or or stolen or damaged. I think I said it.
Can you see what I wrote?
I can't read it.
Point of order, you,
Yes.
you shut down conversations, but you're allowing this to go on. Can we be consistent about keeping people conversational? I mean, you just cut off this trustee's question to the director, but this conversation is going on here.
Well, no, she asked a question and she was done, so then it's the next person's turn and trustee Henley.
He asked a
Right,
question.
that's the question.
He asked a
Okay,
question.
but before that, he asked a question to trustee Henley
I'm just
and I
trying to get-
didn't allow that because trustee Robinson was next.
Seems like a real time saver, by the way.
With the exception,
I don't know. Elementary wise here, I don't know what to this.
You were next, but if you want to take a few minutes to digest. that, then
I
we
just
could
wanted him
director
to
go.
tell me if I typed it right.
Okay, so did you type it right? Okay, all right, director?
Yes, I had notes from what I kind of mentioned last time, and just that regardless of previously acquired is unclear to me, because if a material was previously in our system, librarians refer to purchasing additional copies due to demand or a replacement company when a material is lost, damaged, or stolen, etc. A librarian bases whether it is a new item, which is a selection decision, on whether we hold the cataloging record already in the system or if it is a replacement or addition. Librarians would hold this would meet the withdrawal criteria, not the selection criteria, which is essentially a higher standard. Once libraries make information available, courts have found that removal of that material must meet First Amendment doctrinal tests, because that removal could constitute abridgment and violate negative First Amendment rights.
All right, so we will have to come back to that section at our next meeting. We're moving on to the materials withdrawal and deselection policy.
Sure.
No, I'm sorry, kind of concerned that when our time is up, we're just gonna move on because I've been accused of I can't remember how it was, but mismanaging the board's time. So I need to be more cut and dried about moving on and.
So my question is about whether or not you expect me to make these changes for the next meeting, which is next week, with this topic on the agenda.
The ones that we have agreed to.
It's not clear to me what was exactly.
We have, okay, well, maybe you can meet with that later. I've got the things that we had consensus on.
Point of order, consensus is unanimous. We didn't have consensus.
It's not according to Robert.
Yes, it is. I just reread it today. Yes, it is.
I or whatever.
Yes, it is. It implies that there is unanimous agreement. And we do not have unanimous agreement. Those are the words in Robert's Rules of Order.
No, actually, the page that was pointed out to you last time specifically says that he knew that things were changing and that it would be a tyranny of the minority to expect all changes to be 100%. So,
No, it does not say that.
anyway, so we are on to materials withdrawal and deselection policy. I think that was. Oh, yes, discussion of materials withdrawal and reconsideration policy.
Point of order,
Yeah.
point of order.
Trustee Lang?
Yes, I would like to read that from this page of
Okay, we
Robert's
can
Rules of
move
Order.
on to the next section. So
I'm sorry, this is a point of order. This is a point of
but
order.
we're already on the next section. So
Right,
unless
this is a
the
point of order.
Applies to this section, then you need to move on.
All right, I'd like to say that consensus in its original sense of unanimous agreement,
Trustee Blank, you don't have.
unanimous agreement. That is from your page.
All right, so materials withdrawal and reconsideration policy, I believe there was legal concern with guidelines being inadequate on page 1. The last two bullet points, both contain the words is inappropriate for minors. Something, I think the concern there was that something that is inappropriate for like the 0 to 12-year-old collection, might be okay for the 13 or 16 and up collections. So we need to figure out wording that would move materials instead of just moving, you know, something that might be inappropriate for a 5-year-old, but appropriate for a 13-year-old, instead of moving it straight to the adult collection area or to the, or to a library location other than regular adult collection. We need to figure out some wording that would just move it to the next age bracket that it would be appropriate for. Trustee Bloss?
So again, this policy is talking about the block of books that are below 18. I don't think there's any inconsistency about the definition. The definition in this policy is simply the Idaho Code. And that applies to the whole block of you're 18. It just, there it is right there. It's all the materials that violate Idaho code. I think you could make it clearer because now we've got 3 groups. I would like to strike juvenile and young adult section and just put non-adult collection. That definition, inappropriate for minors, is Idaho code. And it says it shall be removed from non-adult collections is what I think it should be. And I don't see any inconsistent with using it later.
Trustee Robinson?
Okay, first, it sounded weird hearing in the definition in this policy, which obviously means that the definition in other policies is different, which again makes it extremely confusing to staff and everybody else. What I want to say though is the second to last bullet point. If material is inappropriate for minors but produced for adults, move to adult collection area. Why would there be any books in the minor section that were produced for adults? And that's literally a question. I don't know if that's ever a thing that's produced for adults, but it would be in the minor section. I'm just wondering if that needs to be in there.
Actually, I think I've seen a book review that said that originally this book was produced for adults, but they've thought minors would be interested in it and they moved it down to the minors section.
Okay.
So some libraries do have like the same book would be in the adult section and different library would have that in the minors
Okay.
section. Trustee Blank?
Can the director clarify that? Does that happen?
It does happen. I think of classics usually like Lord of the Flies or something like that, that is like a college bound reading, that was written so long ago. There was no teen audience at that time. So it's usually reflective of the publishing industry and when the item was published.
Dan?
I think that needs to remain in there. There's some other author, I can't remember her name offhand, and I think it's either to a book challenge or I don't know how the library may have been notified, but the books were removed from minors to adults. So I think it leaves us a mechanism to have things remedied by keeping that bullet point in there.
Trustee Bloss?
So I don't know what the confusion last week was. I think maybe it's that there are now 3 tiers in the non-adult collection and only 2 were mentioned here. But I would like to get consensus to just put non-adult collection in the definition to make it clear it's anything under 18. So in that definition, minors inappropriate or materials inappropriate for minors is that definition of Idaho code, and it has to be removed from non-adult collections. And it needs a different name. It needs a different, I'm not attached to this particular name of this definition, but the definition needs to be different than the other policy. Because they're different. You cannot use the same definition. This is the Idaho code. The other one is the specific
Not.
definition that's listed in the policy. So they need different names. I don't want it the same.
Stanley?
No, I agree. We don't need the word juvenile or young adult in there. It just be minors or non-adult, either way. I think the law sees that. I don't know, I'm not a lawyer, obviously, but there are infants, which I think are below 18, or we call them minors, and we have adults. We don't have a special legal category, I don't believe, for juveniles or young adults or anything else. We may have different bins or buckets or shelves in the library to it for those particular target audiences. But from a legal standpoint, you're either a minor or you're an adult. There's no in between.
Trustee Blank?
I am still quite concerned about the fact that we have definitions, two different definitions for harmful to minors and in our two policies.
No.
And I don't want to be interrupted. I am very concerned about that. And I'm very concerned that that leaves us legally vulnerable in ways that we're maybe not aware of. I would like to second Vanessa's request to consider the policy that was drafted by staff and given approval by the attorney. In fact, it was at some of the, my understanding was at some of the attorney's suggestion that the staff try to draft a policy. That brings these two policies plus the library cards for minors policy into
So,
one.
point of order.
I'm sorry, I am talking.
Because you're not discussing
I am
this particular policy. That can be brought up at the end when we discuss.
I am sorry, I am comparing this policy to something else. And that is what I'm talking about. And it is, it is,
We
I'm-
consider something, which is fine, but
Right,
at the
and-
appropriate time, which would be at the end.
I am
of the-
sorry, asking to consider is an appropriate thing. I need to be able to finish my speech. You are
I
violating
know,
my,
but it's not germinating into
this is,
this.
yes, it is. I am telling you that
Suggesting
this,
that we consider another policy. is
I
not
am
germane.
sorry. You are violating my First Amendment rights to speak.
No,
It
I'm
is
not.
relevant.
I'm
It is relevant
exercising
and
what I'm
germane.
supposed to do as a chair, which is to keep things germane to the thing that we are discussing.
I am discussing, I'm comparing
What I'm
this.
saying is that.
You
bring that up
allowed
at the end.
another trustee to speak on this, add another policy. I would like to do the same.
So
I am
bring it up
sorry,
at the end.
no,
I'm good with that. I'm just saying that bring it up at the appropriate time.
I am bringing it up right now. These two
Trustee Blunt?
policies need to be put
So
together.
I'm ruling that you're out of order. So trustee Blas?
I move that we consider the materials withdrawal and reconsideration policy and sequentially for approval. It's on the table now. You want me to reword it? Now we discuss what's on the table.
Okay, so it has been moved that we consider the materials withdrawal and reconsideration policy
In
in
sequence
sequence
for approval.
for approval. Okay, so back to the section where we were.
Point of order. There's a motion on the table.
Yes, and so,
We need to discuss it and vote it.
no, the business is brought before the board. And this is not usually done in small boards, but it's absolutely not wrong or prohibited in any way that you bring business before the board. And then, when you get to the end, you can vote on it. Trustee Blas?
Yeah, so it's on the table.
This is a point of order, point of order.
Second,
Okay, hold on.
I've been given the
Trustee
floor.
will state her point of order does.
This is section 25, as you've pointed out, and there is nothing in that section that says that you do not vote on this motion. I don't mind looking at it sequentially, but this is out of order in terms of parliamentary procedure. And You can't make a motion. There's no place in parliamentary procedure where you make a motion and then you move on. You deal with the motion.
That will, since section, wait, it's not taken.
Sure.
Trustee Boss,
So we have to vote on it when we have completed the process in seriatim or in sequence, and it's section 28, not 25. And it is a motion, and it's on the table, and we have to talk about it section by section, and that's all that you can talk about. Motion's on the table.
Have you tried to be more polite on the word?
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Okay, Trustee Blank,
Is that a violation of my right if I have to, if I am only allowed to talk about one section and can't compare it to another? Or I can't look at another policy? Is that a violation of my First Amendment rights? I mean, to be able to speak freely and in a germane and relevant fashion, comparing them. This is a question for our attorney.
well, you could,
This is a question for our attorney.
Point of
if
order.
the attorney was the Robert's Rules expert,
I want to know if my First Amendment rights are being violated by not being allowed to speak, to compare this different sections of this with, I'm sorry, I have not completed my thought. If I am not allowed to compare different parts of this section in a relevant and germane manner, staying within these policies, if that is not a violation of my free speech.
I think according to Robert's Rules, you could compare something, you could say, what about this wording? And that would be fine, but you were suggesting that we,
I've just been limited right now with this motion.
You were suggesting that we consider another policy, which is not germane to this discussion right now, and I already said a couple of times that you can bring that up at the end, and we can vote on whether we are going to address that in the future.
But
I'm not against that. But anyway.
That was not what I was asking right then. What I was asking right then is, I am being restricted to talking about a certain paragraph in this, and I can't go and compare it to the rest of it or another policy in place. I can, or being considered. I can't do that. Is that limiting me? I cannot I have to stay within this tiny little paragraph. The only thing I can talk about, I can't talk about how it relates to the rest of it. I can't talk about how it relates to the other
Point
policy.
of order.
Is that what I'm being
Point of
limited?
order.
There's a motion on the table to review this, and this is not the time to talk about First Amendment rights and things. I should have done this at the beginning. We started doing this, but are we on, did we jump down to materials inappropriate for minors that's on the screen? Can we get consensus to make that change, to make it clear that it's for non-adult collections?
Right, that is a section that we were going on, and I guess I had an assumption that we were, just gonna deal with things that the attorney had pointed out that were concerning and might need to be changed. But yes, now there's a motion on the floor that we moved, that we considered, or that has been moved, that we consider the materials withdrawal and reconsideration policy in sequence for approval. So that's where we are at, is that is inappropriate for minors that are under disposition of materials.
Can we get consensus on that change? That's what we were trying to do.
Yeah,
There's discussion.
right.
That's how it is normally done in small boards.
No, it is not. It is not. It is out of order.
No, not according to Robert's Rules. We are not.
We do not have a parliamentarian.
Okay, but I'm the chair and I'm ruling that your point of order is not well taken. So,
Respectfully, you have a motion on the floor. So you should either withdraw the motion or vote on it, but continuing to conduct business without addressing the motion.
well, until we vote on that motion. The motion is kind of in control. So if trustee Blank would like to move the previous question, we vote on it right now, then she could say that. But otherwise, the motion controls what is germane, what we're discussing.
We haven't voted on a motion.
We're not done.
Yeah, we're not done.
The motion wasn't to do the policy. The motion was to go through it sequentially, and we had to decide whether we were going to do that or not. That's what the motion was.
Move the previous question, you can go ahead and do that. But otherwise, this motion is on the floor right now and it controls the
What is
conversation.
the motion? Can we restate it?
It has been moved that we consider the materials withdrawal and reconsideration policy in sequence for approval.
So then if the board doesn't want to consider it in that way, then they would not vote to do that, right?
Exactly.
No,
A motion would not just restrict the debate without the will of the society. Otherwise, anyone could move at any time to restrict the debate in any way they would like. And that would be the true tyranny of the minority. So I don't see how a motion by itself could simply limit debate.
Well, it did seem odd to me at first. I did consult the parliamentarian and he said, yes, that is the way things are. That's making a motion is bringing business before the board. And
Point of order, there is no place in Robert's Rules of Order where a motion is treated in this fashion. And it has been done in several meetings previously. And my concern is that it makes everything that we do inappropriate.
okay, well,
This is, and you haven't brought the parliamentarian here. We don't know who it is. And, it's wrong.
okay, as I said, I'm the chair and I'm supposed to rule on the point of order. And with the knowledge that I have, I'm ruling that your point is not well taken. If you have something, bring it up to me, send me the page number and the section number, and I will look at that before our next board. But for now, I'm ruling that your point is not well taken. So trustee Glass?
yeah, read paragraph or section 28, consideration of a paragraph by paragraph or seriatim that explains it. The small boards on section 49 says informal discussion is permitted while no motion's pending. It doesn't say you have to do it. And once there's a motion introduced, you discuss it. Well, the motion's introduced and the motion is what controls what's on the table, and what controls on the table is that we are going to go through this. And any of us can make a motion without a second
Chair.
in the small board.
Trustee Robinson?
Okay, I understand what everybody's saying. Even though everybody's saying kind of different things. I have always understood it as, yes, there's a motion to go through this piece by piece. We vote on that motion, then we go through it piece by piece.
The motion.
Because I'm not talking to a trustee, I'm talking to the chair. What we've done in the past, and what I've always seen in any other board situation, a motion is made, and in this case, to go through this policy piece by piece, we vote on it, then we go through it piece by piece. So I don't understand how there's this open motion that we're gonna spend an hour and actually not get done with it, because we know we're not gonna get done with it. Then what happens to the motion?
Okay, so if you guys don't want to do it that way, like I said, you could call the question, we could vote on it right now, but then that would, but otherwise, then we just continue with this. So trustee Glass?
Point of order,
The
point of
motion
order.
is-
I have
the
a
motion
point
is
of
to
order.
Approve it. So if you're
I
gonna
have a-
call the question. we're
I have a-
voting.
I have a point of
Hold on, she's got a point.
I have a point of order. I think we have some confusion here about what small boards are. Discussion is allowed to start before a motion is made on small boards. In regular boards, there's no discussion before a motion. Discussion, and that would be fine. I have no problem with the discussion. But once a motion is made, it's a motion. And it goes through the steps of a motion. He made a motion. He did not say, I would like to discuss this sequentially. We can easily do that. We can have discussion for as long as we want on small boards before a motion is made. And so that is what the confusion is. And you are wrong to say that when the motion is done like this, it's a motion. It is now a motion.
Okay, so I don't want to spend the next 35 minutes discussing that. So if you have evidence contrary to that, like I said, please send it to me.
Here, pass down the Robert's Rules of Order book to her, please.
Right here. This is over.
No,
I,
a
the
motion.
way I read it, and like I said, I discussed it with the parliamentarians, so send me the exact section.
When there's a,
Hold on, I have the floor. I will read it before the next one, and if I'm wrong, I will change it.
I would like you
trying
to
be
read.
fair, but that is my reading, and that is what the parliamentarian told me. And so we are gonna get back to discussing the section disposition of materials that is inappropriate for minors, and those last two bullet points. So, press pause.
Can I interrupt to do it?
Number 4 of small boards.
To call for the
Number
question. Call for the question, please.
Okay, good question.
The call to question means we're gonna vote on
That's-
this policy,
That's right.
no,
but we haven't decided on the changes.
we,
We're gonna vote
I
on your,
moved a motion.
we're gonna
to
vote on the
approve.
motion.
So if you vote on the motion, we're gonna approve this policy.
correct. I called for it.
Okay,
It isn't
so
about whether we're
the
gonna
previous
discuss.
question has been moved, so that would stop debate and we vote on the original question
Actually, we
After we
vote on
vote.
it.
after we vote on whether we're going to stop debate and vote. So right now, those in favor of the previous question, which means stopping debate now, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, all those opposed, say,
Nay.
okay. All right, so I guess I would be a nay also, but that takes the motion off the board.
No, no, it's the call to question.
Oh, right. Okay, so we're not, right. Thank you for setting me straight. I'm trying to do things properly. So like I said, I know I'm up for learning and doing things better in the future. So just send me the section that says that we can't do it that way. All right, so that motion, we are not going to vote on that motion. It is still on the table. All right, so back to the disposition of materials section on page 1. That is inappropriate for minors. Yes, trustee Foss.
Well, I would like consensus on that change. It's showing up there. To remove juvenile and young adult and replace it with non-adult for non-adult collections.
Director.
Are we going from the start, section by section? Because I had a section starting in the first paragraph.
Let's see, we previously,
Sequential.
We can, but this is where we were.
I'm just trying to be clear
Yeah.
following the motion that wasn't approved.
Well.
okay, yeah, we were on that section. We can
Let's start at
go
the
through
beginning.
it and. Okay, all right, starting at the beginning, if that's what everyone wants to do.
That's what the motion is.
Trustee Hanley?
I would just suggest we could finish that one sentence and then go back to the top and start.
Yeah.
We're almost finished.
Point of order.
Trustee will say your point of order.
The motion is sequential from the beginning.
And actually, it doesn't say in the beginning.
Oh, what's sequential mean then?
Well, I mean, we add a section.
Oh, that's even more confusing.
I'm not trying to be unfair. I'm trying to do things right. We were already at that section. We could go sequentially from that section, or we could go sequentially from the start, which is,
Start at the beginning.
by consensus. Okay, so we have one start at the beginning, trustee Blank. You want to start at the beginning or start at the section where we were at?
At the beginning.
Okay, and trustee Robinson?
At the beginning, because that's how it was said.
It didn't say at the beginning, but
Well,
anyway,
sequentially.
okay, and trustee Hanley, you said,
Sequentially means one from
I
one to
could go
10.
back to the beginning, or I can finish this sentence and go back to the beginning. As long as we finish this sentence, we don't have to continue down and skip the beginning where we were. I want to make sure the director gets her say. So So long as, if we finish this sentence and we can go back to the top and go down, I'm fine with that. So I don't know if that's a confusing response.
Okay, yeah, we might as well just start at the beginning so we don't have to argue over it for the next 30 minutes where we're gonna start. So, okay, so starting at the beginning, materials withdrawal and reconsideration policy. Everyone good with that? Okay, next, the introductory sentences there, this policy defines, is everyone good with that? Director?
My question was, I believe you just made a recommendation to change the title of that policy. Did you want this policy to reflect that change? So it was the material selection and acquisition policy. And so here it's just referred to the material selection policy. So just clarification if you want consistent language between
Okay,
both policies.
we're not on the withdrawal or the material selection policy, we're on the materials.
So the very first paragraph
It's the
here
terminology in the first
is
sentence.
the terminology.
Oh, okay.
This on second sentence, good catch. And acquisition.
Okay, so, trustee Blank?
Oh, no, I have a question, but if you had something you needed to say.
Okay, well, I was just gonna get consensus on making that change. The, so in
I
the,
don't know what the change is.
right here, so that top section there that starts with this policy defines, and the next sentence says materials are defined in the material selection. And the director wanted to add an acquisition policy to make them, line up.
Is there, okay, I do have.
Okay, trustee Blank?
Where is materials defined? Where is materials defined in the materials and acquisition policy? Am I not seeing it?
Yeah, right, it's under minor.
Material. Any book magazine, okay.
Okay, any other comments or questions? Response?
If we're done with that, I've got one in the next section.
Okay, we're not, yeah, so hold your ponies. All right, so do we have consensus on adding and acquisition? In between selection and policy there? So it would read materials are defined in material selection and acquisition policy. Moving for it, so that is a majority consensus. All right, so then we move on to the next section, which is withdrawal materials, reading. Do you have anything in that section? Trustee Fox?
In the bullets below, we want to go to there. I'll wait if there's anything on the first paragraph.
Okay, anything in the first paragraph? Okay, hearing none, we will go to the bullet points in that same section. Trustee Fox?
The very last bullet, community relevance. I thought about that. It's really vague. I don't even know what it means. I guess if we did a survey of our customers, what they thought if it's relevant. I would like to go back to the court language that we keep seeing. And put in there, adheres to local community standards. This is what the courts always say is your selection and your deselection, all this stuff is supposed to be following, supposed to adhere to the community standard. And then part of that is what is our community standard? That's what the court keeps saying. So is that by percentages of people that are youth, adults? Is it by percentages of people of different religion? Is it by percentages of, anyway, I think that's what we need to do is make it look like what the court would be looking for. Just instead of a weird or a vague phrase, community relevance, I think it's adherence to local community standard.
Okay, so you want to replace the words community relevance with adheres to local community standards?
Yes.
Professor Mike?
I would like to hear from the director on that. She raised her hand at the same time, so.
Okay, Director?
So I would just refer the trustees back to what's listed here as the CREW, the continuous review and evaluation for weeding. While this term might be vague to someone that's not in the library field, the CREW book is 175 pages and it goes into quite a bit of definition on what is community relevance. So I'm happy to identify that section, that paragraph in the CREW method and bring that to the board so they can review. Again, that's fairly detailed information and very operational, so not usually the area of board consideration, but I'm happy to bring that information that librarians use if anyone feels it's vague. In terms of adhering to a local community standard for selection or deselection, I would refer to legal counsel on that, whether or not it would be an improvement to then, again, you're citing in this paragraph above that we're following the CREW method, and these 5 bullet points represent 175 pages, and now you're introducing a new concept and putting it under that. I think it would need its own paragraph or its own distinction to make it clear that that's not listed in the CREW method. And again, I would really lean on legal service to make whether or not the community standard is the criteria for withdrawal.
First class?
I don't know that these bullets were intended to be a summary of the CREW method. We say up there above
Yeah.
that it's
But they are.
it's a separate sentence. Criteria for selecting materials for withdrawal include. It didn't say this is a summary of the CREW method.
I read the CREW book and that is what it is. There's many more pages. There's actually, I think I brought to the board's attention, there's a CREW method for digital resources that I'd really like the board to consider if they're putting it in the policy. It's a shorter volume, but it is a separate text. And so this is a summary of a very extensive text for instruction for staff.
Sure.
Trustee Robinson?
Community relevance, could that include, because I don't know exactly what it means. Could that include, since we live in a place where there's a lot of evergreens and a lot of snow and rain, community relevance could even be like how to cut down a tree or best place to store the snow that you took off your driveway. Is that because I feel like some trustees feel that like community relevance, they're taking it to like a harmful to minors scenario instantly, instead of it being literally what the community has around them physically.
I'm sorry, who was next? Okay, Director?
I'll just say, so this is in the, criteria for staff to identify items that need to be removed. The number 1 or number 2 things that we're looking at is age of material and how much actual use it has. And so this is just an area of, so maybe we purchased books on surfing and we don't do a lot of surfing in the Inland Empire, so to speak. And so maybe it didn't receive any use and it's now 10 years old. Those are all factors that we would review for removing that item. So I do agree with the trustee that, librarians typically look at age of material, use of material, and again, community relevance. That's one of the reasons that maybe it didn't circulate. Community relevance can be out of date. There was a time, I like to talk about hairstyling books from 20 years ago. We all love to look fashionable from 20 years ago, right? So there are materials, a lot of health information, again, out of date. All of that kind of information is included in this material, in this resource for professional librarians. So it is not in the same meaning as what has been interpreted or one interpretation. Trustee Claus.
So to me, community standards means just what the other trustee mentions, it's how much interest, or are there a lot of gardeners in our community? Should we have more gardening materials? Are there a lot of people that do homesteading? Should we have more books on that? So but if we're buying a lot of books or have a lot of books that don't match the community standards, that the courts say, I think this is really relevant, we should pare those back to match, and we need to have some survey or some way to know what the community is. And I would like to ask the library director to provide us what are the community standards we go by for deciding what our books are. Can you provide us a survey you use to decide books? But this really is what I wanted to add in the other policy too, but the community standards is what the courts say, and that's what we would be looked at with this policy. And that's why I think it's important to put it in there, because the courts.
Yeah, I would like some data on community standards as well. I see them as two different things, so there's the community relevance and the community standards. So, and maybe we could have, just add an extra bullet point in there and keep the community relevance. Trustee Allen?
I think when we get into community standards versus community relevance, the standards is more of a appropriateness, and it's going back into these definitions. If we're going to get into community standards, it probably belongs in the next section down, if we're going to address it at all, as far as being inappropriate or appropriate, or it appears the way this sentence is written in the section we're on now, the withdrawal of materials weeding, that these bullet points do appear to be associated with the CREW method. And I'm assuming community relevance is meaning what's popular right now. I mean, coloring books were real exciting for a while, and I don't know if they dropped off or not. You probably bought stuff like that for a point, but at a certain point, they don't get used. Well, then they get weeded over time. I just feel like the community standards is more of an ethical issue. And I don't know that that's what these bullets are related. I'm not sure it fits into that particular section. So I'm not saying I'm necessarily opposed to community standards being somewhere, but I'm not so sure it fits into that in this particular paragraph.
Great. Who's next? Okay, Assistant Director,
Without
without objection.
I just want to direct everybody back to the last sentence under the withdrawal of materials. It says criteria for selecting materials for withdrawal. So we are talking about taking materials out of the library, and Trustee Ploss is saying he wants to take materials out of the library that adhere to our local community standards. Does that make sense? We're not talking about things to add to the collection. We're talking about reasons we would withdraw something. So you're wanting to add in that it's adhering to our community standard, if I'm reading this from a librarian's point of view. The other piece is that the reason community relevance is in here is because we read sometimes based on space. So if you have the history of Idaho, Washington, Montana, and then you have the history of Vermont and Texas, you're probably going to pull the Vermont and Texas ones because we don't have enough room on the shelf. So community relevance is literally what's close to us, what is going to be a topic of a school subject. Like, so community relevance and standards are very different things. And I don't know that it's understood that you're asking us to add in withdrawal material that adheres to local community standards. Like, that does not make sense in the librarians.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Thank you for explaining that, Director.
Who's just going to read from the CREW method. This is page 17 out of 93, and page 18 is a checklist of weeding factors. And it says, for all materials, consider date, author, publisher, physical conditions, additional copies, other books on the same subject in the collection, expense of replacement shelf time. And then one of them is relevance of the subject to the community. And the question is the material of interest to anyone in the community? So that is specifically how librarians have been informed on how to review that. There's also a whole section on for review for juvenile and young adult materials, for periodicals, for, I mentioned digital resources. So this is quite inclusive. And again, these bullet points are specifically relating to sections in this peer method. Mr. Boss?
So to answer Assistant Director's question, I'm not looking for this revised wording to mean we add books. What I'm saying is if we're off base, we've got 70% of our books are, I don't know, example, but 70% of the books are addressing one type of people, and there's only 5% of those people that live here. Maybe it's I know religion is bad, maybe Muslim or something. Maybe there's only 10% Muslim. I don't think we should have 80% of our books be Muslim if there's only 10% of the people that live here that are that. That's just an example. I'm just saying our books should, what we have in the collection, if we're going to get rid of some, maybe it should be also looking at community standards, because that's what the courts keep pounding these cases on. And I'm just looking at that as being another criteria, perhaps.
Trustee Blank?
Would the issues that just would seem to be addressed under community relevance? Isn't that true? I mean, if our community is made up of 80% of people who are, to use the religion, we would not have a huge section on, right? Okay. One of the things that I have concerns about adding something, this is one of the areas of the policies that we've been considering, which is very clear, gives very clear direction to staff, and is backed up by an entire reference piece. Could we be nice to staff and not add something to it? I think that community relevance is going to cover, especially in the assistant director's definition, is going to cover any concerns that we have overly purchased in an area that no one then in the community is interested in. So I would say, if anything, can we just provide clarity for the staff?
And Trustee Claus?
I just wanted to use the word local community stand, because that's what the courts keep using. I've never seen any of these court cases brought forward that say community relevance. I'm just trying to make this easier to go through the court system by using their terminology, and maybe we can have both.
Okay, Treasurer. I would just be cautious, because what I heard in some of the trustees' comments were viewpoint or content-based review and weighting based on viewpoint or content. And so I would definitely not recommend that the board put in any language that confused the staff in that area.
So you brought up getting local community standards. Do we have any consensus on that?
I like relevance.
Trustee Blank?
I didn't understand what you were asking.
I believe Trustee Claus was asking for, well, actually, I guess.
You're just asking to change, whether we change the word?
No, you just asking for what the local community standards are, how do we judge that? And so I was in favor of getting that data, or.
Is that on the agenda?
It's we're being told that it's the same thing as community relevance.
So the board decide, so that's what you're asking, is you are asking whether we're going to make a decision on whether we're requesting the staff to get data on community standards? Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Okay, then I do have something to say on that.
Okay, that well, you already have the floor.
That is a big job. It's a huge job. It is, and it's just, it hasn't come about through any discussion. It's not on the agenda. I don't have a problem with putting it on the agenda to discuss, but asking the staff in the midst of all of this to develop a whole survey or whatever on what community standards are is enormous. And so do we just want to keep, I'm not in favor of doing that without some discussion on the agenda at least and allowing staff to think about it.
Okay, Trustee Robinson, Director.
So I'm just gonna say I'm confused. I thought we were talking about changing the last bullet point from community relevance to changing it to something to adhere to the local community standards. So I thought that was what we were talking about. So I'm not understanding that there's now a new process or survey or something that's going to be done to determine what staff feel is the community standard or understand that. I would refer the board back to the library strategic plan. That really is the guiding document. That really is the document that has data and surveys and information relating to use. And so local standard is also determined by use and other data that we have access to. And so again, I'm just gonna repoint the board back to the topic, which was changing the last bullet point as my understanding. And I would not recommend that because as I heard it just explained to me, it seemed like there was some indication that staff should be looking at viewpoint in reading materials, which we have learned from council is not an area that we want to go into.
Okay, well, if it's in the strategic plan, I guess we could just ask if you could send that page to us that has that on there.
It's on the library's website and the board has been given that in their initial booklet. You guys don't have the strategic plan.
Okay, could you just tell us what page it's on if we have consensus to do so? But anyway, Trustee Robinson.
And you know what, the word standard of what? You know, like the community standard on what type of cuisine they like to eat, the community standard on what? So it makes no sense that you're all of a sudden to direct the staff to find out the community standard. I agree where the strategic plan would be a great place to start. Another place is actually the public that comes to speak to us, which is literally 50% say one thing, 50% say the other. So there is no community standard that could help staff weed out a book unless the employees were untrained, didn't know what they were doing, and had never stepped into a library before. These are professionals that are trained to do this. There's no community standard, again, whatever that means, that could be put into this withdrawal policy. That's what the reconsideration of material would come in. Somebody from the outside would fill out a reconsideration of material, then it would go through the process. But there's no standard that you can like point a finger at.
Okay, well, I think that's what the courts ask. Trustee Fox?
Yeah, this is what is, I'm having trouble finding it in this Solano County case I have here, but every court case refers to it, starting with that Supreme Court Miller case, or maybe, I don't know if that was the first time, but they all say you have to meet the community standard. And I'm wondering, first of all, what is it? And second, why aren't we doing what the courts say using a community standard? So I'm fine with letting it go for what it actually is now, but I would like to put it in the policy because that's what the courts say. And I'm proposing just adding it as a second bullet instead of changing, leaving community relevance. I would look for consensus. Can we just add the adherence to community standards? We can deal with what it is later, I guess, but that's what the courts keep asking for.
Okay, Trustee Robinson?
Okay, so what I'm getting from the trustee is that he is talking about books for minors. Again, and only books for minors. Is that, I mean, that's the only thing I can come up with why this keeps being brought up. Because the court cases have to do with books for minors, right? Yeah, appropriateness or harmful to. So this withdrawal of material weeding section is for the whole entire collection. It's not pinpointing for minors. In fact, another trustee said the next section down, material inappropriate for minors, might be a better place for it.
Mr. Blank?
The red flag was raised for me when the director said that, adding that there, it highlights viewpoint discrimination, which is something that our attorney has tried to be, said we have to be in particularly very careful about here. And so I would like, I don't want to make us legally vulnerable. I think we've made ourselves very legally vulnerable in many ways in these policies. But maybe before we add that community standards, particularly with this red flag of viewpoint discrimination, we would want to check with our attorney.
Trustee Hanley?
The community standards might be something that's considered in the purchasing and the acquisitions area. Whereas to me, this policy here is dealing with materials that are already existing in the library system. And so we have the ability to remove books that violate Idaho code for minors. That's in the next section down. I'm not really sure I understand where community standards come in with regard to this particular bullet point. I mean, if community relevance, meaning if the book is being used, I assume it's relevant to the local community, and that's one of the things they're looked at. I guess that's what gives us a measurement of turnover and usage. And I'm not sure what we gain in looking at, if something violates our community standards, well, that's okay if it's an adult book, my understanding. But if it's for minors, it's not okay. And that's covered in the minor statutes down here with Idaho statutes regarding minors. So I'm not sure where I see value in changing that bullet at all.
Trustee Klotz?
Well, it was something that I specifically had, but we ended our discussion on the material selection, but I did want to add it in that paragraph. A material selection that I think it really belongs there. I guess if you don't want to remove a book for content base, but the courts still say we should be buying our books based on community standard. It seems like we could remove it too. So maybe it doesn't belong in the removal. We could just leave that more pristine the way it was, but I do want to add it to selection.
The selection and acquisition policy?
Yeah.
Okay, so when we get back to that
When we get
next
back
meeting.
to do that.
Director?
I was just gonna point out, I have the crew method here, and I was gonna point out how they use the word standard. Again, because it's less clear for staff and what you're proposing to add. This talks about if a current edition of standard works. So standard works may be considered classics by other people. The term standard reference tool, the Texas Public Library standards, because this was based in Texas, it uses standard 38 times, and none of them have a reference to a community standard. It talks about consult standard bibliographic aids, standard collection aids, resources that are not on standard lists, that were never reviewed in a standard review source. So again, I'm just gonna say that I know standard might have a definition for some people, but for librarians, when you're talking about the crew method, and as it's cited here, we're talking about a standard in a different way. Standard policies for every library, some standards, again, it's not in any way referencing local community standards in this policy, in this material, in this book.
Okay, if we have no other questions or suggestions for that section, without objection, we'll move on to the materials inappropriate for minors section.
So just to be clear, is that being added or removed?
We'll drop it.
Yeah, but there was not consensus. on that section. All right, trustee Blank?
Moving on to the next section, I do not understand the word notwithstanding right there. I don't understand why it's there. I just looked it up for dictionary, Merriam-Webster, in spite of Idaho code. Why is the word notwithstanding there? It doesn't make sense to me. Who wrote this and why was it put there?
I requested that we put the notwithstanding Idaho Code 1815-17D because that gives an exemption to libraries, which means that if we just went materials that violate Idaho codes 1815-13, et cetera, well, nothing would violate that because we have an exemption. So I think that we needed to have a notwithstanding Idaho code in there to say that, well, despite the fact that we have an exemption, if anything violates the other codes, it'll be removed. Trustee Foss?
Okay.
I think another word could have been used synonym as, without consideration of Idaho code or something, but that's all it means. I think it's more legal notwithstanding.
I don't
But you're
understand
not
what
going
it
to
means.
consider the D, which is the legal exemption for librarians. You're not going to consider
Well, are you asking that we change that?
Am I? No, I'm asking, I don't know. It is completely confusing to me. It, it doesn't make sense. So consequently, I can imagine it wouldn't make sense in a court. Perhaps the attorney could help me understand. Does it need to be there? Does it not need to be there? What is it? I'm asking the attorney.
Are you ready to answer that?
Well, my understanding is similar to what the chair stated, is that 1857D provides an affirmative defense and a prosecution for disseminating materials harmful to minors. And it doesn't really change the rest of this sentence, that materials that violate 18, 15, 13, 14, and 15 shall be removed. If that stood alone, it would still require materials harmful for minors to be removed. It seems to be that the policy is just contemplating that there's an affirmative defense, and we're saying, despite the fact that the library director may have an affirmative defense for disseminating materials because of the statute, we're still removing it. That's my understanding of the phrase.
Yeah, so my idea was just that, okay, we're gonna ignore that we have an exemption and we're gonna follow the rest of the law. So trustee Yanni?
Yeah, I've always struggled over that word notwithstanding, and I understand what it is. It's almost, if I'm getting it correct, it's aware of the fact that we have a legal exemption, whatever it's called there, is the word?
defense.
A legal defense,
Affirmative
defense, where we are allowed to have inappropriate books. We're aware of that, and we're not going to exercise that. We're going to actually say that if these books violate these codes, because we're a library, we're not going to use that exemption. We're going to remove those books So as long as notwithstanding means that we're aware of the fact that we have a legal defense, or we can't have these books, we're not going to exercise that. And so if that, in one word, takes care of that, I'm happy with it.
Okay, so our time is up for this policy and we're going to go ahead and move on. We will come back to that section at our next meeting. We're moving on to the director evaluation policy. We've not had a legal review on that. We do have motion on the floor is, I move that we review and edit sequentially the current draft of the library director's performance evaluation policy. So that is what we are going to do. And then I will find, where we left off last time was on page 1. Under, actually, two sentences after the green section where it says compile a single evaluation. So the sentence under, or two sentences under that where it says board chair submits completed performance evaluation to board legal review, or to board legal counsel for review. That is where we're going. So does anyone have any comments or questions on that sentence? Board chair submits completed performance evaluation to board legal counsel for review. Professor Robinson?
Why is that necessary? If this actually, the evaluation policy passes, I assume that's with legal review. Why does it need to go to review after we fill it out on our own?
I'm not sure. Trustee Hunt was Peters.
Good.
Go ahead, Trustee Hunt.
Oh, what are you gonna say? If there's something in there that's, we'll say, libelous of sorts, we would like legal counsel to look it over and say, hey, you got a risk area right here. You might want to reconsider what you wrote in here before you provide it to the director. That was why I put it there.
Okay, so is that necessary for something that's gonna be done in executive session? Or? And I'm not opposed to it, I'm just wondering.
Let's see, what exactly, can you restate that?
The board chair submits completed performance evaluation to board legal counsel for review. We have not previously done that when we evaluated a director. So if we were going to be reviewing the director in an executive session, do we need a legal review for that? Because it's not public record. Right.
Is this submission regardless of if we go into an executive session, or is it if we don't?
Jen?
I assumed it was either way. It's just whatever our final product is before we submit it, and is to look it over and make sure we're not making accusations or statements that are factually incorrect, if there's some way to say that. But just as a precaution, that's all. So it wasn't to do with the policy, it's to do with the content of the actual performance evaluation.
Thoughts?
I think part of the question that was coming up last week is, or the last meeting, is this all done in one fell swoop in one executive session? And I think Trustee Hanley and I, this was discussed at the committee, we kind of assumed it was a two-step process. It was done, put together in executive session, and then offline the legal counsel takes a look at it and just makes sure their wording is okay. And then after that, then we have another executive session where we present it to the library director. Does that sound right?
And director?
Okay, I would just step back a second and say that this is a policy. And so think of it as black and white, like if you put it in the policy, you would have to do this. If you just change the word that the chair may submit the completed, then again, it's still, you have that option. You can do it or not do it, and it's your choice. So I would just suggest adding the word may.
Yeah.
I'm fine with that.
Is everyone got consensus on that? So, okay, looks like we have consensus. We will be adding the word may and then removing the S from submits.
And adding the,
Board chair may submit, Okay, do we have a consensus on adding the word the there?
Yes.
Just to make better English. Okay, so we've got two, I'm for it, so I guess that's consensus on that. All right, board chair may submit the completed performance evaluation to board legal counsel for review. Okay, anything else, or should we move on to the next? Okay, Trustee Hammy?
I just had a question. If it's out of line, fine. I didn't know if we were going to continue pursuing this policy. I thought we were supposed to get legal counsel to tell us whether or not the personnel manual covers the library director or it does not, so that's why I'm a little lost in terms of, are we allowed to have a special policy? Is that okay? Or is it supposed to be where the personnel manual is comprehensive and includes anything and everything that's in there applies to the library director? So that I thought was unanswered at one of the other meetings.
I've seen in at least one other, I know, library where they do have a performance evaluation policy for the director. Trustee Boss.
We didn't get attorney-client counsel on this. And we can proceed, but I don't know that we want to go discussing all of this in public meeting, but I think we can go ahead and make the changes as we go and it'll become apparent.
Do you have any comments?
Well, my opinion is that the director is considered an employee, so the personnel manual would apply, and any director evaluation policy would need to be consistent with the personnel manual, if not in it, a separate policy that's consistent. And any change that we make would need to be consistent with the employment contract. And any change that we make shouldn't be punitive or remedial. It shouldn't be considered like a disciplinary action. It should be a pretty dialed in normal evaluation if we're going to institute that. I agree the personnel manual doesn't have an exact procedure in there for it, and it needs some clarity, but it does apply to the director.
Okay, Trustee Blank.
We are discussing a policy now. Policies are not allowed to be discussed in, as I don't think so. I don't think in executive session. I mean, this is a public discussion, and our attorney did send us some information and he just repeated it right then. But you know, we can't go into I mean, we need to discuss this in public. It's a policy.
Right, I think the executive session applied to the actual evaluation.
No, not right. I think that it was being implied to talk about the policy in executive session, and that's what I heard. And so I was responding to that.
Okay, for your.
I was not responding to what we were just talking about. I was responding to the fact that our attorney had given us some information, and that information is public. And he just made the statement about it.
Okay, well, it looked like we had two trustees who were not agreeing with what you said. So I think that is not what they were trying to apply or say.
I'm sorry, I was just trying to say that we need to talk about policy in the public.
Okay, no, that's fine, your comment. I just was clarifying to you that they're both saying, no, that's not what they were trying to apply or say. Trustee Boss?
What I was inferring is the attorney advice should be private. It isn't something for public. The policy we need to go ahead with, and all I was just saying is some of what he may advise. I would appreciate if he would do it privately so that it wasn't a public discussion, the advice. But we do need to go through this publicly, and we need to probably restart the committee if this is taking too long, but we've got a few more minutes on this, so let's go with it.
Okay, so is there any more comments on the board chair may submit the completed performance evaluation to board's legal counsel for review, or shall we go on to the next section? Trustee Blank?
I do have a question. Is it being said that any advice that the attorney would give us on this policy, we can't talk about except in executive session? Is that, I mean, I'm confused because we have information that I would like to talk about here, and it seems like it's on this policy. I mean, he has given advice to us out loud on other policies. So am I being stifled is what I'm asking.
No, I think he answered your question. Trustee Robinson?
Maybe the confusion is, maybe one trustee is saying if we submit
No, I'm not, that's not me.
no, the other,
Okay. All right.
if we submit the evaluation to legal, after we complete it, that, his feedback on that would be in, executive session, not, no, that's not what you're saying?
Hey, Trustee Fox?
It was specifically to what trustee Hanley was asking. We have a committee and the committee went off to find out as a result of the committee meeting, what we can do. And it took a while to get answer from our legal counsel. But the committee went to go do this and I didn't think it was appropriate to discuss all that publicly.
Okay, so do we have any further changes on that sentence? Trustee Robinson?
I don't, but I think it's important that this gets clarified. The committee meetings, even though the committee meetings are open. So if you had questions for the attorney during that open meeting, wouldn't the response be public as well? And I mean, honestly, I would like to know that answer. Because I think I understand what the trustee's saying now. He asked the attorney a question in a public meeting, but wanted a private answer, and I don't know how that works.
Okay, well, were you present at the, okay, so I don't think the attorney's present at the
Oh,
committee
okay,
meetings.
okay.
He's,
At our last regular meeting, he was here and then he emailed us his response. So it was at the regular meeting that we officially asked legal counsel, but we had previously discussed it in the committee meeting that we needed clarification.
Okay.
Trustee Blank?
I now have a question. That answer is public, is that correct?
I believe my characterization would be that our email is consistent with what council just said in today's meeting.
Yes, yes, it is. So it's public.
Okay. So without objection, we will move on to the next sentence. Board chairman or full board meets in executive session with director to discuss evaluation. Trustee Robinson?
Who would decide if it was just the chair or the full board that is gonna meet with the director? Or what determination, for that?
Trustee Hanley?
I think that was in there because there was concern if we could not get into executive session. We didn't have a 2/3 majority, then it would be the chair's job to deliberate. I believe that's why it was in there. So I think that the desire and the expectation is that the full board would meet with the with the director. But in the event that that was not possible, then it would be the chair.
So maybe clarify, we could put, or preferably the full board, or trustee Fox?
No, if you leave it this way, we have a choice, just like the other thing where we put may or something. We put board chairman or the full board may meet with, leave us the option.
Trustee Robinson?
But whose choice? If it's worded like this, the chair could just say, I'm doing it myself.
Trustee Blank?
I am worried that this might violate Idaho code because it is the full board who is the boss of the chair. It's the full board. It is not the board chair, who's the boss of the director, I'm sorry, who's, and it's so if there's anything that this is inconsistent with Idaho code is what I would say.
Trustee Hanley?
I just flipped over to the next page and it does talk about going into executive session. You can't do a 2/3 vote. So I don't know if we want to, with the sentence we're still working on, just say full board would meet with an executive session with the director if able to go to executive session. Otherwise, the chair would meet with the director. I don't know, or we can somehow figure out, incorporate the discussion on executive session with that particular bullet point. I'm not sure, but I think that those two things are related, so we'll be combine them or reference one over the other.
Okay, I have an idea, but the director was next.
I would just restate my opinion that the board is creating a policy for an instance that has never occurred. And that it is best practice to address any of those types of issues that come up at the time of that. So this should be a clean policy on evaluating the director, so to speak. And so again, because this has never happened, it does not make sense to me to include all of this information. If you cannot go into executive session, then having a public discussion and determining at that time if it'll be the chair or the full board, what would need to take place in those instances makes more sense.
Okay, well, we did have several occurrences earlier or last year where it was denied to go into executive session. So I think it's not a bad idea, but maybe we could put something like the full board, or if that is not possible, the board chairman meets an executive session director to discuss evaluation. What do you guys think about that, Marty?
It's not clear to me if not possible. So is that because someone's sick or because they don't want, I mean, again, that's just not.
Well, actually, if someone was sick, it wouldn't be the full board. So if we had like something scheduled and someone didn't show up that day, I don't think it would be a good idea to cancel the whole thing because we've only got 4 out of 5 people there.
I think it is the full board's responsibility, and I think this is going towards a path where it's implying that the chair has more authority than they do.
I understand that. I'm just like, if it's not possible, then is it just never gonna happen? I guess. I'm not sure. Did we meet with the full board and the director after the last evaluation? Because I don't.
Absolutely, absolutely,
Okay,
absolutely.
okay. Trustee Blank?
I'm going to read to you from the Idaho Code. This is 332720, the powers and duties of the Board of Trustees. 1, the Board of Trustees of each library district shall have the following powers and duties consistent with the laws of the state of Idaho. There's A, and there is B, and there is C, to employ and evaluate a library director or library director team to administer the library. That is the powers and duties of the Board of Trustees. This board has never, ever not gone into executive session for evaluating a director. Never, ever. And just that because of the fact that we chose not to go into executive session for a completely different reason is no reason to compromise this policy.
But it was several times, but I understand.
It was
what you're saying.
not
The
several
chair
times.
Is not the boss, and wouldn't do the, let's see, yeah, the whole board meets for the evaluation itself, but this is just presenting the conglomerate evaluation to discuss it.
To
So the
employ and
evaluation already
evaluate.
done.
To employ and evaluate. This implies that the director is being evaluated. And it says here, the whole board will do that.
Yeah, well, the whole board would have already evaluated the director without the director present. And this is just presenting the completed evaluation.
It doesn't say present, it says discuss.
Yes, okay. Well, just my point being that it's not actually the evaluation, it's just discussing the evaluation. Trustee Henry?
So in some way, do we want to include in or to present?
Yeah.
To present the completed evaluation? Because we're no longer formulating it, it's finished, we're delivering it.
So it's usually mutual.
I think it is too.
There's usually give and take. It actually is not like this is how you did it. It's not like that. It's like, oh, okay, what goals are you interested in achieving? How will you further this strategic goal? I mean, it's a discussion. It is not an imposing
That's all I can say.
Okay, yeah, I'm, much rather not have it all be on the chair, whether I'm the chair at the time or not. But if it's not possible to go into executive session, then how do we deal with that issue? Trustee Blank?
Is, if it's not possible to go into executive session, can that not be dealt with at that time? As the director has said over and over and over, why do we have to put it in a policy? We would deal with it at that time.
Well, I'm just thinking that it has been an issue.
It has not been an issue. It has been maybe 2 times and not for this at all.
So then at that time, we go through a 6-month process of trying to come up with a policy.
No, we make a
Okay.
decision on how to deal with it because we can't go into executive session at that time.
Okay, well, if it's not gonna be an issue, then it shouldn't be an issue to have this in the policy. Trustee Fox?
Yeah, I changed the wording up there. I think it should be in there just to cover it. I'm not, there may be a reason that 2 trustees don't want to meet. I don't know. I don't know. All it would take is 2 to say they don't want to do it. And I don't know what the reason would be, but there should be a way to handle it. So what I'm suggesting there is the full board, or if not possible, the board chairman meets in the with the executive director to present and discuss, should say, the evaluation.
It's completed.
The
I like that sentence. Trustee Hanley?
And I don't see, going back to the director's comment, I don't see this as a demanding, slamming a thing on the ground. Here is the completed evaluation, and that it may be a time then to discuss the future. That's usually open for discussion at some point, but if someone doesn't like a performance evaluation, there's ways, at least in my past, to challenge them and say, no, I think this is inaccurate. But that's usually like an appeal that's done after it's been presented, and not even necessarily at that same session, but to come back, because I never read my entire evaluation when I'm sitting there. It's pretty much, here's your eval, Tom, and then I take it away, go digest it, and then sit down with the boss. That's my experience with it. Again, going back, I've never done an evaluation with 5 people. So that's always been my boss, or I'm the boss, and I do an evaluation on 1 person, not 6 people doing 1 person, so 5, so. But, okay, that's all.
Okay, well, yeah, as has been stated, the chair is not the boss, it is the board. I like that sentence up there. I just foresee a possible problem that, if we had something scheduled, 30 days in advance, and then 1 person wakes up that day and is sick and can't make it. Do we need to reschedule, or, Trustee Hanley?
Can we just take the word full out of there? I mean, the board meets, so that might solve that, strange scenario.
Yeah, that sounds like a really simple solution. Thank you for suggesting it. So. Okay, so, Trustee Blank?
Are we going to be putting anything, it says to discuss the value, did we talk anything about goal setting? Or the future, the year's plans, or is there anything in that? If this, as we go on through this policy, it seems unreasonably punitive. It doesn't feel like there's any collaborative efforts that the board has with it feels, that there's no goal setting involved. Is this, to discuss the evaluation? Did we want to expand that? Did we want to make it something that be valuable for the board and the director to set some goals for the year or anything like that?
So could we put to discuss evaluation and goal setting? Would that satisfy your question?
I don't know if it would satisfy it. It would certainly be better than it is.
Trustee Hannan? Or, oh, your point.
Typically, in the library director evaluation process, there's also a conversation about compensation and increase in compensation. And so it's very unclear to me how in this scenario, the chair would be acting on behalf of the board in offering that compensation. So currently, the contract, it's not relevant, but again, this policy is for beyond. It's a living institutional policy, so it should include that aspect of compensation.
So we had and goal setting and compensation. Trustee Hannan or plus?
There may be an off-cycle evaluation that is done. So I don't think it should have the compensation tied into it. But we could certainly say what I put up there, the director goal setting can be done at this time or another subsequent time. If this is an off-cycle, 6-month evaluation, I don't know that you would do goal setting. I don't know that you would do compensation. So I don't think it should be tied in there. The compensation is the annual. We should have that in their annual evaluation.
Trustee Blank?
Yeah, it needs to be stated at least once that we're gonna do some annual goal setting and an annual compensation discussion.
Just clarify that there is some language that is talking about in accordance with library policies and procedures, and the district's procedure is an annual evaluation. So I would recommend that the board seek clarification about off-cycle evaluations.
Stanley?
Goals are part of the form. I don't know if we're using this form or not, but I think we were. So the last part of the form talks about reviewing past goals, but also goals for the upcoming year. So it is a piece of this evaluation form. All right.
That's the one we choose. Trustee Watts?
No, we haven't talked about the form. I've got an alternate one that I'd like to propose. But I haven't
You too. We're not there yet. Yours is the best. Let's see. Okay.
Sure.
Trustee Blank?
I would say we should put the goal setting and compensation under the evaluation schedule.
Second.
2 more seconds. Evaluation schedule.
Okay. So this is just for the compensation. Okay, yeah, that makes a certain amount of sense. So we take out that last sentence and add that to the evaluation schedule when we get to that part.
Chair,
Yes, Trustee Robinson.
there's a lot that's going on behind me. And I actually didn't bring my prescription lenses because there was no speech going on today, so I figured I wouldn't need them. I need them, believe it or not, from here to there. I can read prescription bottles, just so you know.
We do.
But it's all this typing over here, and then it goes up over there, and then it's not even like said, it's just like, oh, I think that's good enough. It's not any better for me having this screen up here and everything getting changed.
It isn't. Okay, so we should make the font bigger.
Or maybe the screen in front of us, and I'm not saying you guys had a choice,
Yeah.
but this is not, as of right now, this is not working for me.
Trustee Potts?
So I don't think I've left anything in that we haven't had a consensus, although we ended the last time on the other policy, and I just saved it. We didn't finalize, and we just ended, but we're trying to do a consensus. And I'm trying to keep track of it and have it there so we can all see what we're doing. So, yeah, we need to bring glasses, we need to reorient the room, but
Anything,
This, so that's in the front next time.
can you make the font bigger?
Well, it's full screen. It's in the
I can't
doc.
even read it. I mean, I can't read it sideways.
Trustee Henley?
I think the screen is excellent. I mean, it's not well positioned for what we're doing. Maybe it wasn't expected by facilities here, staff, but I find it very helpful when we start twisting and working on wording and we get it up there. Even though we have, this being taken down by the secretary or whatever, or Janelle, sorry. I find it very helpful. It's just, obviously it's not well placed where it is, but when we start wordsmithing, I think it's extremely helpful to see that we're all on the same digital page up there, not different scribbles on our own copies.
Yeah, I agree. It's really helpful. Just, we could find a way to make it better. Trustee Claus?
So I'm trying to make the document look like it does on the paper. And if I go make the font different, it's gonna change the way it's laid out and everything. And I mean, I can do that for this.
Yeah, so
Sure.
since we're just going section by section, we don't need to have the whole document there to view it. Yeah, I mean, we need to be able to read it.
Like that.
It's good to me. You see that?
Mhm.
Normally,
Kind of. I mean, I can read it now if I hurt my neck more, but
Yeah, that's problematic. Yes, business manager.
Instead of changing the font, there in the bottom right corner of your screen is a scale.
yeah,
And you can move the scale and it doesn't change your document as far as format. It just makes it look bigger. Cause I do that on mine.
it doesn't,
Yeah, and then that's part
it
of the
doesn't make it roll.
Mhm.
You have to now. You can't see the whole width when you do that. Anybody use?
so where are we?
We are at, well, it formerly started with board chairman or full board. So the second sentence from the bottom. Still on that first page.
But I mean, what is it supposed to be now?
Well, like it says, the board, or if not possible, the board chairman needs an executive session with director to present and discuss the completed evaluation. I think it sounded like we were going to take off that last sentence that started about director's goal setting. Put that under second on the second page.
Thank you.
Okay, so do we have consensus on that sentence as changed up there on the screen?
Yep.
Yes, okay, yes, we have consensus on that thing, yay. All right, so on to the next sentence, director may submit a written rebuttal with 30 days of evaluation. See if there's anything, that's a comment, not part of it, see. Okay, any changes to that other than the fact that we will need to remove that comment at the back end of it eventually? Trustee Blake?
Is this following the personnel policy at this point? I know there are things we're coming up to that are not, but I guess I'm asking the director, is there any reason why this wouldn't be? Do you want to ask it? Okay, then I'm gonna ask the attorney. Is it following the contract appropriately or? I mean, a written rebuttal, I mean, it just sounds like, it sounds very punitive. And it doesn't, is this something we say in our personnel policies that the staff may present a written rebuttal in 30 days? Or, I mean, is this standard with our personnel policy?
Thought that I read it. Oh, go ahead.
Trustee Blank, I would point you to section 6 of the personnel policy manual.
Yeah.
It sets forth the evaluation procedures. it does provide that employee evaluations, they can submit a written rebuttal within 30 days. It requires that employee evaluations be conducted at least once, or as an individual performance requires within an 18-month period. So it's much more broad than what's contained in the new policy. The contract, that was a separate question. That would be section 8 of the director's contract. And that states the Board of Trustees will evaluate the performance of the library director from time to time in accordance with the library's policies and procedures. So one part of the discussion should be, what's the policy of the library? That would be the personnel policy manual and any other policies that may apply. The other part of the discussion should be, what is the library procedures as well? Because the policy could amend an existing procedure. We should take that into consideration.
Yeah, that didn't sound, punitive to me. It sounded fair. They don't agree. Obviously, they did.
So I would point you to 6.3.4, which is in the personnel manual, which is an opportunity to be heard concerning proposed discipline or failure to perform. So I would classify that as a performance-based personnel action. That's also under performance probation. So you're using it in two different areas in your proposed.
Using
We have
what?
3 minutes left, so, and further. Just want to call that?
On the document or?
On that sentence, yes.
Oh. I just want to say before we get done, I'd like to, you're gonna cut it off, but I'd like to remove the performance probation section and change wording. But anyway,
Yeah, we're not there yet.
that's causing some of the grief, I think. So I'm just saying, and that's in the next section. You'll cut it off.
Thanks, Allison.
So if the director has 30 days, do we need to, add to it what the board's response would be? Like what time frame we would respond to the, rebuttal, or, in what form we would respond? Or is that in here later on?
Is it in the personnel policy?
I'll read section 6. I haven't read section 6
Yeah,
yet.
we have been given the personnel.
Yeah. So I'm not sure.
And again, that might be an executive session, and if you can't go into executive session, then how would that be? That's that scenario where, what if that category that we don't know is going to happen?
Right.
But how could a board who can't meet an executive session come up with a uniform rebuttal?
And like how many days, but like I said, I haven't read the section 6 yet, so.
It's up there. No.
Oh, is it?
It's pretty hard to do it right now.
It's in your package. Yeah, no, I have. I don't think we have time to read it right now, do we?
No.
Sure.
Trustee Claus.
This is just the first pass, and when we do a necessary audit, you do get to go back through again at the end, or we'll probably end up starting over again. But I'd like to move on.
Okay, well, it is time to move on, so that is what we were doing. So next is the insurance update. Director, take it away.
I don't have any information.
Okay. Does anyone, explain?
Did you not ask for proposals, and weren't they supposed to get them back to us by this week? Was that did that happen?
My recollection is that sometime this week, but I haven't received anything and I don't know if it was through today or not. I had planned on getting them back hopefully this week so that I could present something next week, but then this was added and I have not received anything.
Okay, so you just haven't received anything from each of them, but they're supposed to be responding. I thought it was pretty soon.
That is my understanding, but I
Yeah.
have not received anything.
Okay.
Okay. Well, then, without objection, we'll move on. Maybe we could finish from these things. That'd be great. All right, so agenda requests. Trustee Newman?
I have two. One, I think we need to give some time to the library staff's version. I don't know where that would fit in of the material selection. Minor's card, where the last one is there, reconsideration. Let's see, there's three combined there. So I did listen to the last meeting and council did suggest that we do not look at that. We must look at that as well. So I'm taking that into consideration. So somewhere along the line, it has to fit in, I assume, to make sure we're giving everybody their input on this thing. And then the second item I have is.
Actually, maybe we should get consensus on first item first.
Oh, we did, I'm sorry.
So, yeah, I'm for that.
Yes.
Anyone else?
Absolutely.
Okay, we have consensus on that.
So I've already sent out, or you have your agenda. Do you want me to amend it? So we add it to next meeting or another meeting down the road? And it is essentially the material selection policy. It's a version of it. So again, I don't know if you want a separate heading or if you want us to just have a couple time for discussion of all.
Oh, I just don't remember the name of it, that's all. It's a combination of three policies.
Collection,
Whatever.
selection, and
Yeah.
access
There,
policy.
okay.
So do you want that as a separate? Do you just want a good time? Do you want me to amend next meeting?
Can you put bullet points under the material selection policy? We can have a chunk of time for each.
Sure.
Yes, Trustee Glass.
I would like it as a separate thing. It'll disturb what we're doing in the reviewing the policies. We do need to set time. I don't know if you want 30 minutes or something, but I'd like it to be a separate item and not mixing with what we're doing.
Sure. Yes, that's right.
It absolutely has to disturb the other policies because it's all three of them in one. So why bother discussing it if we're not going to discuss them together?
Stanley?
Maybe the discussion needs to be, meaning that the actual discussion is, are we going to put out a combined three policy mixed into one? Or are we going to stay with, say, three policies the way it is now? I think that might be the start of the conversation, because it's going to be very difficult to go through line by line in the draft staff policy and compare that to what we've been working on for the last 4 to 5 months. So I think that might be the initial part of this. Are we going to put all in one, three policies in one, or are we going to leave three standalones? I have a difficult time trying to mix the two together and keep pulling salient points and rework either one of them from scratch.
Okay, so Director, would you like to present your policy and highlight the things that you think are better? Do you think like half an hour would be enough time, or should we push it off until February?
I don't have that agenda. I mean, I think, if it's 20 minutes per policy, the other thing I could consider doing is we talked a little bit about the director evaluation policy. We could take that off of next week's agenda and have a committee meeting and then take some of that time to give us more time for all policies. I would just recommend equal 1/3, 1/3, 1/3 of whatever time we have for those policies for the next meeting. And maybe have a committee meeting to further discuss the evaluation policy.
Trustee Blake?
I would like to encourage us to read this policy in full. We don't have to go through it line by line. What has typically happened, and I have read the policy carefully, but what has typically happened is that the board talks about policy, gives the ideas to the director, and the director goes back and takes those ideas and puts them into a policy. And then we look at it and read it and look at this policy lends itself to that. It has taken the essential ideas from the two and put them together in a more precise, clearer, and as far as I'm concerned, stricter way. That is much clearer. And I would like to not just decide whether we're gonna put them all in one, but to really give some consideration to this, because it may solve a plethora of problems. And it has been recommended by our attorney that we take a good look at it. So we don't have to go through this one line by line in the same way that we have done the others.
Yeah, well, what I would like to do initially is let the director present that they, this is my policy and, I'd like to highlight these areas and that's why she thinks it's severe.
Can we have discussion as well?
We could if there's time. So, that's close.
I'm agreeing. I would like to have the director present it, go through the highlights, what the advantages and why we want to do it. And we can have discussion, but I would say half an hour or something, but I don't, where I'm at is I want to know, is this something we need to put the brakes on the others and go back and do this one seriously? So that's what I'm looking for, is a sales job on why we're even doing this.
Okay.
I will say that I did review, and maybe we could bring in a little bit, the proposed legislation. There is a line in there that talks about if the organization took reasonable steps to restrict access by minors of materials harmful to minors. And so I do think that that actually strengthens our position by putting the minor cards right into our selection policy, because that is a measure of how we're protecting children as well. And having the separate policies, I don't think it's as clear. So I'm happy to present more information, but I think we should review the legislation as well.
Great. So we do have consensus, 30 minutes to discuss the staff policy.
Can we do something to add a little more time? If we're gonna also discuss legislation, these are really important, very pressing. There may be some things that aren't so pressing that we can adjust on that agenda.
Right, so when we get to the special and regular meeting, I would like to suggest that we extend the meeting to 3.5 hours, but we're not to that section yet. Trustee Henley, you have another item?
Yeah, I would like to put on the agenda a discussion on periodic material acquisitions reports. Meaning, they might want to see some kind of report of what was purchased. That was a discussion as part of the library directors report, if I remember correctly, not the last meeting, but the one before. And then it wasn't on the agenda last time we had a meeting. So I think that let's call it periodic material acquisitions reports.
Okay, I also trustee Plus. Okay, so we have a consensus on.
And is that for next week's agenda that's already been posted, or for
That
next?
might be a little bit quick.
Okay.
Yeah, but give you enough time to do it best. All
Sure,
right,
sure.
trustee Plus.
Maybe it was the agenda to discuss it, not to actually get the data. So maybe I would like to take 5 minutes to discuss what it is we're looking for. Maybe. Is that reasonable?
Trustee Allen?
Yeah, but it was to discuss the issue, not to actually ask for a report at this time.
All right, okay, so we do have consensus on discussing that issue. Okay, anything else, or shall we move on? Without objection, we're moving on to the next section, which is the special and regular meeting invitation. Right. That, okay, so I would like to extend the next 4 months of trustee meetings to 2.5 hours. Do we have consensus on that? Trustee Robertson? So we're not actually,
I suppose you haven't clarified yet. Do you mean like to 5:30 or do you mean start at 1:30? But you hadn't clarified, so sorry.
however, it works better for the library.
Oh, okay.
Trustee Blake?
Are you talking about regular meetings?
Yes, regular meetings.
Okay, so,
Thank
and
you
we
for
would,
clarifying that.
regular meetings, and so I would encourage us to, if we're going to extend them later, because we've had the public talk to us about how people can't get here. So they at least would have a little more time at the end. 2 to 5:30 is what I'm saying.
I would just mention that we're gonna start rotating to our branches, and some of those impact our open hours for the public as well. And so, I guess just these three are at Hayden and Post Halls, which have dedicated meeting rooms. But some of our other libraries, if you remember, we take it over. They can't open for regular service. So just mindful that 3 hours is already quite a bit of time.
Okay, so is that in the next 4 months?
I can't remember where we're in April.
April, I think it's April. we
It's
start.
in a, I think it's.
It's on your,
Rathbun?
it's on your spreadsheet here. Do it. We're gonna schedule.
Oh, that's three. Okay, stay next 3 months. Okay, so. Oh,
And I was just gonna point out, our next meeting is at Hayden, although Post Falls is available if you'd rather meet in Post Falls.
We want to meet here. It's bigger.
I like here.
I'm good with either one.
Okay, when I amend the agenda, I'll amend the location to Post Falls too.
Okay.
Bigger.
All right, so next 3 months, we had consensus on that.
Okay, we switched it to 3 months. Okay.
Yeah, 3 months.
Chair,
2 to 5:30.
2 to 5:30.
Trustee Robinson?
So hopefully that won't mean that more things are put on the agenda because there's the extra half hour, that we'll actually get through the heavily worded agendas as they've been handed to us.
Right, so if there's nothing else at this time, Trustee Boss.
Just a question, I thought we were going to other branches one time a year, but you got Hayden down twice here. Are we going to Hayden just because it's closer?
Typically, it's been a rotation between Post Falls and Hayden. And so that was just following the last schedule. I will say that we have a lot more technical and you're on staff to be at Post Falls. It is nice to go to Hayden at least once in line with what all the other locations.
Okay. So you said next week will be here rather than Hayden?
And I'll send the amended agenda soon.
Thank you.
Okay.
All right, then I move we adjourn.
All right, has been moved to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye,
Aye. Aye. All right, it's unanimous. We are adjourned.
we all agree.
I received this.